Hi, I'm Andrew. Welcome to One Shots Tavern, a TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. Today we have Nick Gralewicz and the project A Perfect Rock of Deep Dark Games. Nick, thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to chat today.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to chat as well.
So tell me a little bit about your background in gaming, both as just like a gamer and then kind of leading into game design and hypothetically all the way to now, which you're launching a Kickstarter.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think just 99% of everybody, I started with D&D. A friend of mine asked me to, I think it was when 5e first came out, and they asked me to join a game, and I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I was a nerd in high school, but if I was a little nerdier, I think I would have got into that back then. But I just fully embraced it. And eventually, I started playing, I think it was Microscope by Ben Robbins. That was my first kind of awareness that RPGs don't have to be D&D. And I was, this is a whole different thing. So I think, maybe half a decade ago, I started branching out into different types of games. And I think it was last year or a year and a half ago, decided that I wanted to try designing a game. And here we are. It's just now we're making games, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, for real. Oh man, I feel that. I mean, it's a similar timeline for me. I started, back in high school playing some D&D. It was 3.5, and then we immediately switched to Pathfinder and whatever. But yeah, I didn't really get introduced into the greater world of games until, probably a few years ago. I played Fate and a couple other random ones, but I always came back to D&D as this is the ideal play experience, right? Apparently not for me, because I don't play it anymore. But I feel that Microscope 2 was a more recent discovery for me, and it kind of unlocked a part of my brain of how games can be.
Totally.
Similar to when I first started running Cypher. I don't know if you're familiar with that from Moneycook Games. And
I've played it once. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time that I wasn't rolling as a GM, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, wait, hold on, I can be honest. This can work differently. And then, in more recent years, just continuing to unlock parts of this hobby that I didn't know exist, subgenres and things that facilitate really unique types of gameplay. Mm-hmm. So, you've got this will be your second game.
Second game. I mean, technically, I published A Perfect Rock as a one-page game last August during the one-page RPG jam. So I guess this is 2.5 games if you want to count it. But
I count it. Yes.
Sure. Yeah, we can count that. Yeah.
Third. Yeah, I remember seeing your first game Home when that was first circling around, and I was like, this is a vibe. The art was so cool.
Nice,
and
thank you.
The subject matter of Gundam-y mech fighting stuff, but centralizing it around, that idea of having a home base. I was like, this is cool. This is different. I gotta pay attention. And then I saw you popping up in Zine Month over on Kickstarter for Zine Quest, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be cool. I'm excited to see this, because this is, at face value, I'm like, what a weird title. I'm intrigued. But I'm a sci-fi girly at heart.
Gotcha.
So I was locked in. So tell me a little bit about your project. What's the elevator pitch for A Perfect Rock?
So A Perfect Rock is an adventure planet building game. So it's a little bit of a hybrid of going on an adventure, but also world building, planet building. The premise is that your home planet was destroyed. And so you're an explorer, and you need to go out amongst the stars to find a new planet to call home. You need to find your perfect rock, basically. The kind of little gimmick of it is that as you're going out and exploring all of these new planets, you're using real rocks. Ideally, you don't have to. You could use a deck of cards, or I've got an Oracle deck in the Kickstarter. But you're placing a real rock on the map beside that star, kind of orbiting that star, and that's the planet. You use that to inspire some of the stuff that you explore on that planet. So that's the general elevator pitch, I think.
That's fun. Yeah. I by no means do I mean to disrespect when I say this, but it's every good game's got a gimmick, right?
It's
Like,
kind of a
because
gimmick.
you got to have a thing that like really makes it, catch people's attention. I think that
Hmm.
the name was like, okay, cool, like a perfect rock. Like, I get it. It's talking about a planet. And then when I was looking more at like your one page from the jam, I was like, oh, this is like rocks. Like, we're using rocks. This is cool.
It's a GM-less game. So I love GM-less games. Side note. But this is you can play it solo. And you can also play it with 2, 3, or 4 players, and it's fun with all of them. Yeah.
So, so you made it for the jam,
Mhm.
and but before that, how long was this idea cooking? What's the story of a perfect rock developmentally and until now?
This is kind of weird. I don't think this is normal. I was in a Discord with some friends, and we were talking about there was some other game that asked someone to collect a bunch of rocks as part of their setup for the game.
Mm.
And we were just kind of talking like, wow, this seems like a lot of setup. You have to go and collect a bunch of rocks, and I was just thinking like, oh, like how would you incorporate rocks into a game? And I basically told a friend, I'm like, I have an idea for a 1-page RPG, and 3 days later, a perfect rock came out of my head into like the page. And so it just was like, it was one of those things where it was just like a spark of inspiration, and it just
Yeah.
flowed out. And so that was the first one. And then since then, right? I mean, the first one it's fairly tight. It's just a 1-page RPG. I've been thinking about other ways to expand that out. I think the 1-page does a great job at like giving you creative freedom to build a planet and to kind of explore that with your friends. But um, I wanted to dig into a couple other themes and kind of build that out a little bit more. And so the extra stuff has come since last August.
I'm bad at making small games, so I'll start with that. Right? I'm not good at it. I really want to. I need to force myself to. I really tried to do that 36 word game jam that was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
going around and I couldn't do it. I'm like, I can't get mechanics in there. I need the subsystems. In taking the other direction, right, where you have a really succinct and tight idea of what it should be, what was like the mechanical evolution?
It'll probably be around 44 plus pages. The big thing is that the core game itself is still small, right? There's not a lot. Like I like easy to run, easy to use games. I'm a fan of like very tight, small design. I think the fun comes from how you use that design necessarily.
Yeah.
But a lot of the pages come from the fact that I made a slight shift in this version where in the first one, you just pick a star and you put some rocks around it and you see which planet is the best one, right? That you pick as your home.
Yeah.
In this one, you're going through a bunch of different stars. So part of this, because it's more of an adventure, it's kind of like maybe Fall of Magic or City of Winter, if you've played those, where there's a map and you kind of like go through a map with some baked in locations and things like that. There are a bunch of different stars that you can go to, and each star has like a unique secret or a unique way that it modifies the core gameplay loop. And so you're kind of like picking a path through this star map. And so most of the book is actually these like different stars and little things that happen
Mm,
within them. I want to keep them light
yeah.
because I don't want it to be narrative. Like I don't want it to be heavy-handed from my part. I want to just give you a little bit of a narrative prompt and then let you do the rest.
What's really awesome is when a book, no matter how like succinct the rules are, when the rest of the book becomes about being a resource as opposed to here are all the explicit rules that you need to follow.
Hmm.
That's when I really find I actually come back to those books a lot, right? Because
Hmm.
there's more for me to dig into. There's stuff for me to learn
Hmm.
in the style of play. Like it's not so much just like figuring out exactly the science of how to play D&D, right?
Totally.
It's much more like what's the design ethos of
Yep.
this piece?
Yep.
What is the vibe of play? What are we trying to facilitate creatively for everybody at the table? And then once I get that, like now I just want to play with it, right?
Totally.
That's the point. You want to get there, I feel like, as quickly as possible for people and still give them gamey crunch enough to have fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, I think about when I go back to my D&D like core books, or I go back to any kind of like core book, right?
yeah.
It's always fun to read the mechanics. As a designer, I love good mechanics. I love seeing how things kind of interlock together. But the parts that I'm like rereading a lot is the stuff around it, right? Because that's
Right.
to me, that's like the book. That's the like that's the fluff. That's the fun part. And I don't like a lot of it in the sense that I don't want to be, set in only this setting or whatever, but I
Yeah.
like to be inspired by it. I feel like that's part of the product, that's part of the fun. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's just like, fill it out with some other cool stuff.
I want to see, obviously, once I dig into like the final product down the road, I want to see if I can like uh almost reverse hack this to like discover the horrible planet that you don't want to go to that I'm putting people on for my game.
Well, here's the thing. All of them are horrible. That's the whole
Yay.
like that's the a perfect rock is it's it's called a perfect rock, but the premise is there is no perfect rock. You have to
Yeah.
choose between all of these bad options. So like if we dig into the gameplay mechanic real quick,
Yeah.
you explore some like aspects of the planet, right? Like the sky, the surface, the flora, the fauna, climate, secret, and you roll a d6 to determine the essence of that. And using those things, you kind of envision a small scene that your explorer goes through. Um, However, when you're rolling that d6, 1 through 5 are all not good. They're different variations of not good, right? 6 is
Yeah.
perfect. And so it's like every time you're exploring, it's very rarely that you're going to create a perfect planet. So
Uh-huh.
it's all about how do you choose the best home from all of these bad options, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we like drama in our games. I think about that a lot when I'm working on out of orbit. It's just like I want you to put these characters in terrible situations. That is the point of us playing this game and figuring out what they do with that because like we thrive within those like boundaries
Hmm.
and constraints and stuff.
Hmm.
Which I talk about a lot on the podcast. So to that point, I think my next question that I like to bring up a lot is what were some like creative limitations and boundaries you put on yourself early on, if any,
Hmm.
whether they were conscious or not, to help guide both like game design or art design? Like I know you mentioned before we started recording, you do the art and layout, which is
Yep.
absolutely incredible on this game. Like
Thank you.
did you also do everything on home?
Yep. Yep.
Oh my gosh, yes. Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm so excited. But like for me, just to give you examples, like I've limited myself a lot with color palette. I've limited a lot with like theming and like in my first game, basically if it didn't have the rule was like if it doesn't have to do with teamwork, it doesn't need a rule in the game, like at
Hmm.
all.
Hmm.
So yeah, when it comes to those kind of boundaries and limitations, what kind of stuff did you put on yourself when working on Perfect Rock?
Yeah, I mean, like some of my core design principles for everything I've designed so far is that I want to make games that inspire creativity in people. So far they've tended to be GM-less games because I like the shared authority, the kind of ask of everybody to be equal creative partners, or maybe not equal, but like equal in a sense of
Yeah.
your opportunity to create parts. So that kind of like creative aspect is always a guiding principle. In terms of like the art and design, I pull a lot from some certain inspirations. So like Outer Wilds, I don't know if you've ever played Outer Wilds, the video game.
Yeah.
Best game ever, I think. I I love that vibe, right? Like
Yeah.
strange planets, you know, solar system of like interesting things that are happening, but also a kind of folksy vibe to it,
Yeah.
and it's that kind of like juxtaposition between the two that I find really interesting. So as I've been doing the design, and especially I made a little nursery rhyme trailer for it, I pulled a lot from that vibe in terms of the trailer. And then I think like I I I don't know, like I bounce a lot between other things. Like when I'm doing my layout and stuff, to say that I have one core kind of like guiding principle for it right now is tough. I've got
Right.
vibes that I want.
Yeah.
I've got thematic questions I want to answer. Like to your point, it has to be about your home, right? Like that is the
Mhm.
core premise of all of this game is what does your future home look like? That is the
Yeah.
first game. And then what I've added on this one is what does your past home look like and what does your current home look like in the starship? So it's all questions about your home. And so if it
Mhm.
doesn't, like to your point, if it doesn't relate to that, it gets nixed and cut
Yeah.
and shortened down. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like those are my kind of like boundaries of it. Yeah.
I also love picking up the obvious connection between the theming on your first game literally being called home and then searching for a new home in your sequel, kind of, not sequel, but your next game.
Spiritual
Um,
sequel.
yeah, exactly. Your sequel.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about my second one. I mean, we're a similar timeline here, right? So like I did my Zine Quest last year, and then I'm following it up right after the fact, and it's just like this feels like part two, even though it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point about like the tone and genre of like marrying like the sci-fi epicness of the genre with that personal kind of touch that you said folksy. I really like thinking about it that way. Yeah, I even think about like why people loved Firefly,
Mm-hmm.
if you watched it at all,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's just like there was that marriage of the unknown, the untamed, the brand new that's out there, the discovery piece of it. But with like, the heightened ability to actually go and overcome the stars and like,
Mm-hmm.
the bravado and like arrogance that comes with that, married with
Mm-hmm.
like the struggle and the survival of like you're on the ground in the wilderness still, right? Like you're still just a guy in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which again is similar to stuff that I'm trying to play with in my game that I'm working on. And I love that marriage of those two tones, because often like you get some sci-fi that, or even like cyberpunk, which I very much enjoy for its own right, but like it all becomes very sterile, and it becomes less for me to relate to, of an
Mm-hmm.
environment I haven't ever been in,
Yeah.
other than like a couple, trips to the city, but that's it.
It's just like you have to ground it in like the human experience, right? It's like
Yeah.
if the more that the player can relate to it, and everybody can relate to, I mean, mostly everybody can relate to these
Yeah.
ideas of home and what does home mean, and or for your idea like finding a safe place or strange locations, having to work with your friends to like overcome
Yeah.
these. Everybody can generally relate to these concepts. So when you put all of this cool sci-fi stuff around that, as long as you have that like common touchstone, it
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier, I think, for players to kind of buy in.
Yeah.
And yeah.
What you mentioned touchstones, like in creating boundaries and stuff like that. I also call on a lot of touchstones to like in media that I can attach myself to.
Hmm.
One, for marketing, like let's be
Yeah, of
real,
course.
but
100%.
also for like just again for having like new ideas and a guiding light outside of just games. Right?
Hmm.
Like I like pulling in TV shows and then watching that show and being like, how, if this is my game, how does it run right now? Like what
Hmm.
mechanic is occurring right now?
Hmm.
Um, Not to say you do that, but like what are some of your pillars of touchstones for a perfect drop?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like I said, Outer Wilds, huge
Yeah.
one. Subnautica, in a sense, because of the exploration of just strange biomes and
Yeah.
discovering new creatures. Again, like that's part of the creativity I like. It's like, how are you going to describe, a problematic fauna in this area? Like, you got the whole oyster, like, world is your oyster. What
Yeah.
are you going to? A little bit of like No Man's Sky in the sense of like varying discovery. That's like from like the video game side. From the kind of like TV or book or movie side, Interstellar, obviously, huge
Hmm.
one. Going to some strange place, having those worlds be impacted by the star or the black hole in that sense that they're
Yeah.
around is very cool. I recently listened to the entire audiobook series of The Expanse. So like I've watched all of this the show. Show's
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
PSA, I don't know when this is coming out, but like apparently they're losing the first 3 episodes or first 3 seasons on
Oh
Amazon. Like
man.
the rights are getting changed, so they might, I don't know, but
Ugh,
go watch them. Go watch some of those
it's
episodes.
so good.
It's so good. The book is if anybody hasn't read the book is just as good. It's
Yeah.
awesome. So I listened to that almost like entirely throughout my design, and I think I slowly took some of that, not necessarily in terms of the certain types of drama, but the ideas of what is life on a spaceship? What is it like to find different worlds? What are those,
Yeah.
what does that mean to choose a place to live on, which is again a core theme of that show.
Yeah.
Um, what else? I mean, I take things from like Dune or Three Body Problem or like things
Hmm.
like little things like that where I'm just cool sci-fi, and especially when you're building out a star map with a bunch of different
Yeah.
secrets amongst it, I need to have unique feeling vibes for each of them,
Yep.
right? And so I just tried to find a lot of inspiration in that regard.
When dealing in like creating a world of multiple planets and stuff, I think, and obviously like a lot of the times you're just wandering and it's not populated in a lot of settings. Um, but like to try and make sure that they're not like monobiome, you know, the forest moon of Endor, right? Like where it's like one biome on the whole thing and that's it, and like move on. So like
Hmm.
what does it look like to explore one of these planets in a perfect rock? Is it, I mean, you could have done that and I just took a dig at you. But you
No,
get what I'm
it's
saying. Like, what are the ways that you've created that diversity both in the systems and
mhm.
in within the exploring of a planet?
So I take your dig, but here's the thing: is that because that is how it is. Technically, there's a core principle at the beginning of a perfect rock. There's like 6 core principles that you kind of go through, and one of them is use sweeping brushstrokes, because exploring like a
Yeah,
perfect rock is meant to be played in 1 maybe 2 sessions, right? Like you can play a really satisfying game in 2 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. So it's meant to be
yeah,
kind of completed. And in that time period, I want you to explore a variety of planets, right? I kind of am at the point of it's about a planet an hour generally, with
okay,
like the stuff that's all around it. So when you're exploring a planet, you don't have so much time to go into the very nitty gritty at certain levels. So what you do is you kind of use sweeping brushstrokes to shape the general vibe of the planet.
uh-huh,
But it's meant to say that this is not the entire planet. You are describing
yeah,
the core vibe. And then I give different levels of ways that people can interact with it. Before you leave a planet, you must collect a keepsake. Your character sheet is like your explorer's notes. So you
yeah,
basically draw what you find on that planet, and it's a way to A, add detail at a more granular level, and B, well, decide what your like explorer is a collector of, like
mm-hmm,
build out your explorer's interest, and C, remember those planets. Because if you're 10 planets in and you're like, oh,
yeah,
what did this first planet? You look on your character sheet, you see that little drawing that you
mm,
made. You're like, oh, that's where I collected this weird little, I don't know, like antler cat. Like I think I've
yeah.
got an antler cat as part of my art, and it's just this
That's fun.
is so it's tough. It's to your point of when I'm thinking of game design, I often think about the time that a player is going to take in a certain period, right? And
Right.
so I have to make, if I'm like, okay, I want Planet to take 20 to 30 minutes, how can I make a satisfying experience, and what
Yeah.
level of granularity are you going to do in that 20 to 30 minutes?
Hmm.
And that's how I like to think about game
No,
design,
that's
is like
cool.
time chunks. Yeah.
Well, and like when it comes to, I think about, I mean, you mentioned microscope being early on in your process, and obviously it's
Hmm.
influential on the game I'm working on right now. But like the fractal nature of like diving into smaller parts of the story seems pretty present in this. Like it sounds like,
100%.
we're able to explore the system as a whole, but if we want to get into those intimate moments, those scenes, we can zoom in. But
Hmm.
to your point, the implication is this is not the whole planet. This is not the whole trip. This is
Hmm.
not necessarily everything that we're doing here. It's just the part that we want to make note of for the purposes of storytelling.
Totally.
Which I love that kind of design, and
Totally.
that's exciting.
I think it's fun to play, and I did this at home too. It's fun to play at different scales, right?
Yeah.
Both spatially, like zooming in and out, temporally throughout time and throughout like pockets of time. So I think that stuff is fun. And just another quick aside, if I don't know if you've played In This World by Ben Robbins.
No, I haven't.
So
Yeah, I need
highly
to though.
recommend it, because again, I'm a big Ben Robbins fan. I love the design in their games. And um In This World is like you're building, you take a theme and you build usually four different worlds based on this theme. And
Yeah,
it's a direct, it's super quick, really easy to play, super creative. And it's a direct inspiration for it, because each of those worlds feels connected but different. And so
yeah,
it's that same idea of creating real quick these different kind of things, zooming in, zooming out, and then seeing them all sitting there and being like, how
yeah,
do these compare to each other, is really fun.
yeah, yeah. Ben's incredibly talented. I
Totally.
got the
Yeah.
chance to talk with him because I was like just reaching out on like Blue Sky. I was like, shot in the dark. I'm making a couple games that are inspired by Microscope. You got time to chat? And he was very generous with his time,
Hmm.
and I love the way he thinks about games, and it's really cool. So if you're not listeners, if you're not familiar with Ben Robbins, definitely check out his work. I mean, he
Totally.
popularized a lot of even terminology and how people run campaigns with West marches and all that. Very, very influential designer. Um, well, Nick, I gotta know. So what are you planning when it comes to the actual Kickstarter side of stuff? Both in it being your second one, um, and having a little bit of experience. What are you doing this time with the Kickstarter itself in terms of like rewards and like maybe pivoting away from doing too much on a previous one? That's what I'm doing.
So I'm doing more on this one. I don't know if that's a bad idea yet, but I really enjoyed my first Kickstarter experience. It was a ton of work. It was,
Yeah.
stressful, and this one's stressful too, but like I enjoyed the overall experience of it.
Yeah.
And so this one, I'm kind of just like turning the dial up a little bit in every aspect. In terms of specific rewards, so obviously there's the core zine, the core book. That's there, the digital side. There's a couple patches because I did a patch with Home, and I love patches. I think patches are super cool.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple patches in there, but I'm also offering three other kind of unique things. So one, I love maps, right?
Yeah.
Like a previous life, I worked in GIS and software development with maps. So I love making maps. I've got a huge map on my wall that I made for like my old D&D campaign. I love maps.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I'm making a star map for this game that you can buy and spread out on your table and like put the rocks on as you kind of explore through the stars. Not needed. It's optional. It's like in the book as well,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's something nice about spreading a big map out on your table.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's a rock oracle deck. So I'm also kind of like, I love tarot decks. I love the idea of oracle decks. And I'm also aware that like not everybody wants to collect rocks, or the rocks that you
Yeah.
collect just aren't going to be perhaps as interesting as you would hope.
The rocks up
So
front for me are all the same.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think that, a side note, going out and collecting a bunch of interesting rocks in your area has its own like certain charm. I think
Yeah,
that stuff is
definitely.
cool. But I'm creating a rock oracle deck where it has a bunch of different rocks, rock illustrations, and has some aesthetic inspirations based on those rocks themselves, so that people can use them in the game as planets, but also use them in any game, right? If you're
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm creating an NPC, I'm creating a location, what's the vibe here? Like, there's something in this treasure chest. Like, use
Yeah.
the rock deck, pull it up, and it's just like a fun little extra
Love
product
that.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing is, I wrote a nursery rhyme for my Kickstarter trailer. I don't know how that's gonna like do, but it's
That's
fine.
cool.
Yeah, thanks. And so I wrote it kind of like for my daughter. So I'm gonna print her off a little like actual book of it. And so if people want to like buy a book of Three Little Rocks, the nursery rhyme, you can as well. It's cheap. It's just like
That's awesome.
basically, yeah.
I love accessories, and I just had to kill my scope creep this time. Like I was like, I just can't. I can't do it again. I need to keep it simple and see how well that goes.
I think that like I 100% agree, right? Simple is so key because everything you add on increases like the number of things that you have to manage, number of things that could go wrong, that like
Yeah.
all of these things. And so, well, we can chat again in a year and we'll see how I feel.
No, and I'm not trying to make you question stuff. It's if anything, it's the other side of this. I'm like, no, Andrew, you were resolute in these decisions. Do not go manufacture some stretch goals right now. We're not adding stuff to this project.
No, I know.
The first, week, if not the first 48 hours, is such a thrill. Or it's terrible, right? Where it's just like
Hopefully it's a
nobody's
thrill.
looking at this. Or it's a swell of cash and you're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then it stops, right? Like then things go silent after that like first week. And if you're doing a month-long one, it's long. It's like, oh wait, I got one today, and you're checking it and you're refreshing all the time. And like my advice is, if you're listening right now and you are running a campaign, just don't look at it for most of the day. You don't need to. But for you, what was like, I don't know, your psychological experience, if you don't mind sharing a bit on the first one, and then if or how you're gonna go about this one differently at all.
Yeah, so I mean, it was similar, right? You get that big bump in the first day or two, and you're just like, oh wow, this is amazing. and then it generally lulls out. I mean, home did not bad because I had a Dicebreaker article that came in partway through, so like I had kind of like a
Yeah.
mid campaign
Get a
bump,
bump.
which was great. And I noticed it because I was, I agree. I think this is general good advice for Kickstarter, for social media, for anything. Just limit your time on it, right? Like figure out the
Yeah.
right amount of time that you're going to invest in all of this stuff. Do that, stay connected, and then get out and go live your life
Yeah.
somewhere else, right? I mean, it's hard because I think there's a psychological aspect, like in the first couple days, you see all that money come in, you're like, whoa, like this is the
How
dopamine
do
is
I
going
keep
in
it
your head,
going?
right? But you got to disconnect from that because that's not what it's going to be like for the rest of
Yeah.
the time. I've heard two things. I've heard that it's kind of like the first 3 days, the middle slog, and then the last 2 days or
Yeah.
so are kind of like one third, and one third of your project. I've also heard that that's actually shifting to the front bit. So
Yeah.
the last third doesn't really pan out as much anymore. It's all front heavy, but I don't know. I don't think I have like a great answer for this. I think
No,
it's
that's
just like
fine. I'm just curious. This is
just
selfish.
oh totally no. I think it's just like disconnect, like understand what
Yeah.
success. There was one thing that I saw in one of the Plus One XP Zine Month videos, which are the best videos ever. Like the Zine
Yeah.
Month workshop videos, so good.
Tony and Wes are incredible, and they're doing so much to make
It's
all of this way
amazing, right?
easier for all of us.
Totally. Like if you're a Zine Month creator, go and watch those videos. Go watch every single one, hands down. One of the things that I can't remember who said it. They said before your campaign, go and tell somebody what your expectations for your goal are, right? Go and tell somebody what your numbers are. Just like it could be someone like personal, private, right? Because
Right.
these are numbers, right? But just go and tell like your spouse or a good friend or somebody. I would be unhappy below this number. I would be happy at this number, and this number I would be like so excited, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes if as success happens,
It
your
changes.
perception of those numbers shift, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I would be happy at 5,000. And then it gets past 5,000. You're like, oh, I'm not happy at 5,000 anymore. I want 10,000,
I
right? But
want that number bigger.
you need to
Yeah.
have that kind of like
Yeah.
initial expectation kind of set and like just pinned
Yeah.
somewhere. That's what I found helpful when you're looking at these things, just to keep it in perspective.
Yeah. The very incredibly talented Will Yopes, they
Mm.
are going to be editing on my project for Out of
Nice.
Orbit, and I am so excited to be working with them. They also have an incredible podcast with Adam Vass. If you haven't listened to it,
Brain Trust is great.
so good. They just did a killer episode about Kickstarters and stuff like that. But basically, they said the phrase let your work speak for you. Just unplug. You've talked about it enough because you have like a critical mass to your reach, and now you have to let other people notice it. Let your work speak for you because you busted your ass to make an awesome project, and then let it happen, right? Like, and then just let it, not let it go. Like, there's still diligence when it comes to marketing and stuff, but
Sure.
like on the other side of the coin, there's just checking it every day, posting all the time, begging on the internet. But yeah, like it's running a Kickstarter is truly wild. You are crazy enough, just like me, to do it again after doing it the first time. But yeah, I also had a good experience the first time, and I'm excited to see how this one pans out. So far, it's been pretty good. It's live right now for people listening.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm so excited to dig in and check this game out. What are your plans going forward? Are you wanting to develop a whole new game, build off of something you've done so far? Where are you going coming up after Zine Quest?
Yeah, I mean, besides all of the work to like make sure this gets done and out to folks,
right.
which
Land the plane.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I've said that a couple times now. Yeah, I have a couple things on the back burner. I play tested a game about wreck divers diving into like old discovered wrecks and doing world building through artifact and like location
That's so cool.
creation through these wrecks. I play tested it and it didn't quite meet what I wanted to do. That was potentially going to be my Zine Month project back in the day, but not this time. So that's sitting around. I'll see if I can get that into a better state. I do have like some iterations on home that I would like to either expand out or contract in and kind of, shift up the vibe a little bit. Maybe pull in
Yeah.
like a Horizon Zero Dawn vibe and like a post destruction society into
Very
something like
cool.
that. I don't know. Like I feel like a lot of these things, I am a spark of inspiration kind of person, so there'll be something that comes and just like sets me off
All your
course for a
attention.
bit.
Nick, this has been an absolute pleasure. I am so excited to check out a Perfect Rock. Where can everybody find you? And your games that are already out, and then obviously we'll be linking in the description and stuff like that, being able to jump over to Zine Quest and check out your project.
Yeah, so I mean, like a Perfect Rock is on Kickstarter. You can find Home and Perfect Rock and all that stuff at deepdark.games. That's my website. Uh, Deep Dark Games is my Instagram. Deepdark.games is my Blue Sky. I don't know. I'm less on the social side of things.
Yeah.
I try to keep that limited, but you can find me at all those places. Easiest place, deepdark.games, the website. And yeah, I don't know. Reach out. I'm always happy to chat with folks. It's fun.
Yeah, I again, I'm incredibly excited for this one. When DJ let me know that you had reached out, I'm like, yes, immediately, yes." And I know people will be listening, and this is already live, so you're probably in the moment where people are listening in the slew of the beginning of a Kickstarter. But yeah, I wish you the best of luck. You've got tons of awesome followers already checking out, seeing lots of people checking it out and sharing about it on Blue Sky. So I wish you the best.
Thank
Good
you.
luck launching. And for all of our listeners, thank you for being here. We are doing tons of coverage of Zine Month all February long, doing about 2 episodes a week. It's crazy. If you want to support the podcast, you can check us out at oneshotstavern.com. You could pick up a t-shirt. You could just say hi. We're mostly on Blue Sky, not so much on TikTok and all that stuff, but we're over on YouTube and Blue Sky quite a bit. So please find us there and check out Nick's game, Back a Perfect Rock, on Kickstarter today. And we'll see you guys next time.